Good evening, and welcome to Thurgood, starring Mark Cryer and directed by Aaron Simons. Before we begin, please take a moment to silence your cell phones and note that the use of electronic devices, including video recording and photography, is strictly prohibited during the performance. In the unlikely event of an emergency, please follow the usher's directions and walk to the nearest exit. Be sure to join us for the fall main stage production of William Shakespeare's Measure for Measure, November 3rd through 12th. Thank you, and please enjoy Thurgood.
Well, might as well get right down to it. I've given 50 years to the law, seen a lot of things, and I'm too old to keep secrets. Here at Howard University, we were taught one simple idea. The law is a weapon, if you know how to use it. I was here during the Great Depression, class of 1933. Now you all got this fancy auditorium, even got a chandelier hanging here. We had a 3-story brownstone with no heat. Nobody knew what air conditioning was back then. I'd take the train over from Baltimore every morning. They used to call Baltimore up south, because Baltimore's where the slaves ran to when they escaped the plantations in the deep south, which may have something to do with why I was born here. My grandfather's name was Thurgood Marshall. He owned a grocery store on the corner of Dolphin and Division. Grandma Annie, she was the lady of the store. One day when the power company decided to put an electrical pole right in front of the store, Grandma Annie, she went to the store and grabbed an old caneback chair and plunked herself right down on that very spot. And there she sat for 4 days and 4 nights until she got her way. They say that Grandma Annie's was the first successful sit-down strike in the history of Maryland. My mother's father's name was Isaiah Olive Branch Williams. He came back from the Merchant Marines and started a family, a boy and a girl, named Avon and Ivania, named after Shakespeare's rivers. Then there was Denmedia Marquetta, named after the family store. My mother Norma after Bellini's opera, and my Uncle Felix for the way he glared at his daddy the day he was born. As a young boy, I came to understand 2 things that marked my family: distinctive names and extreme stubbornness. I was named after my grandfather, Thorogood, Thorouggood. By the 2nd grade, I got so tired of writing out all those letters, I just shortened it to Thurgood. The year I was born, 1908, there were race riots in Springfield, Illinois, the home of Abraham Lincoln. 89 Negroes were lynched, and the NAACP was started, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Any of y'all ever heard the name Homer Adolph Plessy? After the Civil War, Homer, Plessy, and Negroes all over the South could vote and sit anywhere they damn well pleased. But in 1890, Louisiana passed a law ordering rail companies to create separate accommodations for white people and colored people. You know what they called it? An act to promote the comfort of passengers. Well, Plessy decided to challenge that law by taking a seat in the white-only car just outside of New Orleans. When he refused to move, they arrested him and hauled him down to criminal district court. Well, Plessy said the law was a violation of his 14th Amendment rights. Well, Judge John H. Ferguson, he didn't see it that way. And he charged Plessy a $25 fine. Well, Plessy, he refused to pay that fine, and him and his lawyer took the case all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States. The case was called Plessy v. Ferguson. The justices ruled 7-1 against Mr. Plessy. Here's what they said. The 14th Amendment could not have been intended to enforce social equity. The feelings of inferiority that come from being segregated exist only because the colored race chooses to put that construction on it. So what did it mean? It meant that states were now free to pass any Jim Crow laws that forced Negroes to accept separate but equal facilities. Growing up in Baltimore, we had to use separate park benches, separate water fountains, separate public toilets. You want to understand my story, remember that name, Homer Adolph Plessy. My daddy was a waiter on the Pullman Car Railroad. He had blonde hair and blue eyes, and people often mistook him for a white man. He was the most insidious of my family of rebels. He taught me how to argue and debate. He would challenge my logic on most every point, even when we were discussing the weather. Now, he didn't have much schooling, he was angry, and he was a drinker. But somehow he got interested in the law. His hobby was to go downtown and sit in the back of the courthouse. Some days he'd take me with him. When we'd get home, he'd sit at the kitchen table and kick back a few shots of whiskey, and he'd test me on the cases we saw. We would have the most violent arguments. He had his own way of making his points. He'd say things like, "Oh, that's mighty black of you," or "Must be a white man in the woodpile." One day, he sat me down and he said, "Thurgood, anybody ever call you nigger, you have business with them right then and there. Win or lose, right then and there." Anybody ever hear of colored high? Colored high? That's where I went to high school. Same high school as my mother. Now, back then I had the habit of saying whatever was on my mind, and so I would get into arguments all the time. One day the teacher says in front of the entire class, "Thurgood, you are disputatious," and hands me a copy of the United States Constitution and sends me to the furnace room to memorize some part of it. That was her special punishment for me. By the time I reached my senior year in high school, I'd been sent to the furnace room so often, I knew the whole thing by heart. From my second-story classroom window, I could look right down on the Northwest Baltimore police station and see the white police officers bringing in the Negro prisoners. "Black boy, why don't you shut your goddamn mouth? Nigger, you gonna talk yourself right into the electric chair." To this day, I still can't get it out of my head. Sound of those cops beating the hell out of those Negro prisoners. I arrived at Lincoln College with a colored book in my back pocket and a highly cultivated interest in the female gender. I was painting 7 co-eds, all at the same time. I had already decided to become a dentist and never lift anything heavier than a poker chip. One day a bunch of us decided to go downtown to see a movie. After we paid our quarters, they told us we had to go around back and sit upstairs in the crow's nest in the colored section. I tell you, if enforcement hadn't been such a problem, they would have made a law that said white folks get to laugh first. But anyway, we asked for our money back and they refused. So we got mad and broke a door and tore down a couple curtains and ran like hell. We were pretty pleased with ourselves, but that night I couldn't sleep. I lay there thinking, am I going to have to spend the rest of my life being humiliated because of the color of my skin? One of the boys with us that day was Langston Hughes. Yes, Langston Hughes. He was already writing poetry. You see, Lincoln was an all-Negro college with all white professors. Langston, he was a fighter. He had organized a campaign to get Lincoln to hire some Negro professors. The next day I went to Langston and I said, I want to work with you. We had our first Negro professor within the year. Langston taught me something. One person can make a difference. He got me committed. I put away the comic books and stopped playing pinochle and started reading history and joined the debate team. And then I met the most beautiful, sensitive, smart, 17-year-old co-ed you ever saw. Everybody called her Buster. I told Buster she could wear my pin. Buster informed me that I was going to marry her. And that's just what I did. Now, I knew I wanted to go to law school, so I had to make some money. So I got a job at the Gibson Island Club where my daddy was head waiter. One night, this United States Senator comes in, a very crude individual with a bevy of beautiful women, and sits down under the portrait of some great Confederate general. He spots me. Hey, nigga! Now, I don't like the idea of him calling me that, not one bit. But I go on over. Hey, nigga, I want some service at this table. Now, I give him service, and he keeps calling me that. And I am liking it less and less. But when he gets up, he leaves $20 on the table. Now, this crude fella, he keeps coming into the club, and he keeps leaving me these $20 tips. Well, them 20s, they add up. Well, one night the senator comes in, and my daddy hears him calling me nigga this and nigga that, and sees me running over taking good care of him. My daddy's blue eyes were on fire. Thurgood, you are fired! You are a disgrace to the colored race! After my daddy calmed down, I explained to him what was going on. Now, just between you and me, anytime you want to call me a nigga, you just leave your $20 on the table and you keep doing it all day long. But the minute you run out of them 20s, I'm going to have business with you right then and there. The University of Maryland Law School was just a 10-minute trolley ride from our house. And even though we paid taxes in Maryland, they wouldn't accept my application. And the Plessy decision said they didn't have to. I told my mother, someday I'm going to get even. The only other choice back then was here at Howard University. You know what they used to call Howard back then? The Dummies Retreat. Now, I still hadn't made enough money waiting tables. I didn't find this out till years later. But my mother, she took the bus downtown and she pawned her engagement ring and wedding band so that I could study here. Charles Hamilton Houston took over the law school the year I started. Charlie was as handsome as a movie star and as sharp as a whip. He had been an officer in the Army in World War I and was the first Negro editor of the Harvard Law Review. Charlie stormed into class that first day, wearing his Phi Beta Kappa key, and slammed the door behind him. Look to the man to your left. Look to the man to your right. Understand this. 2 of you will not be here next year. I am here to make Howard University into the West Point of Negro leadership. There are 160,000 white lawyers in America and less than 1,000 Negro lawyers. We are here to change that. I want you to learn what your rights are under the Constitution, regardless of how they're being interpreted by the courts, and use the law to obtain justice. You cannot go into the courtroom saying, "Oh, please, Mr. Court, have mercy on me because I am a Negro." You will be in competition against highly trained white lawyers, and if you expect to win, you had better be better than they are. If I give you 5 cases to read overnight, you better read 8. And when I say 8, I mean 10. You go that step further, you might just make it. No one had ever challenged me before. But here was a great human being telling me to shape up or ship out. and I was not going to ship out. Some days I'd take the trolley over to the Supreme Court building. I'd stand on those steps and I'd stare at those words carved in stone. Equal justice under law. I'd stand in the back of the chambers and listen to the great lawyers of the day like John W. Davis, the one they called the lawyer's lawyer. He'd speak in those smooth southern cadences and get all 9 justices in the palm of his hand. I could feel in my bones the power and majesty of the law. Charlie Houston took me under his wing, and we started talking about how to take on segregated schools. Charlie said there were 2 ways. One was to go into court and challenge it head on, arguing that segregation was against the Constitution. And the other was to use the Plessy decision, the separate but equal, to insist that states provide a truly equal schools for Negro students. We called that one Jim Crow Deluxe. So how do you start? Charlie decided that we would start with university graduate programs. Find somebody who wouldn't be afraid to stick their neck out, who wouldn't be intimidated. I found a fella named Donald Gaines Murray. He was an honor graduate from Amherst, and he agreed to apply to the University of Maryland Law School. I had a score to settle with those bastards. Dear Mr. Murray, President Pearson instructed me to return your application and your $2 money order. The University of Maryland does not accept Negro students. We maintain Princess Anne Academy as a separate institution for the instruction of Negroes. This was Exhibit A. We sued the university, charging that by denying Mr. Murray's application, they had violated his 14th Amendment rights. So, one Monday morning, Donald Gaines Murray, Charlie Houston, and I walked into a Baltimore City court in our double-breasted suits, handkerchiefs in our pocket. President Pearson began by informing the court that there was an exceptional institution for the study of law available to Mr. Murray right down the road at Howard University. Well, the dean of Howard Law and his prize pupil were fixing to show his ass just how right he was. President Pearson, it is true, is it not, that the University of Maryland does not accept Negroes? And you say that Princess Anne Academy offers the same caliber of education with the comparable faculty? Well, is it not true, President Pearson, that Princess Anne Academy has only 1 faculty member with a master's degree? And the dean uses the title doctor, but it's honorary? Isn't it true that the University of Maryland Law School uses prominent Baltimore judges to teach the laws of Maryland? Well then, if Mr. Murray chooses to practice law in the state of Maryland, how can any other law school be equal? President Pearson, would your university accept Filipinos, Mexicans, or Japanese? No, you would. So then why are members of Mr. Murray's race not admitted? Because state policy decrees it. Thank you. No further questions. Your Honor, the state of Maryland cites Plessy v. Ferguson and its doctrine of separate but equal to justify its segregation policy. But we have not argued today against their right to have separate schools, but rather we have proven that Maryland's separate school system is not equal. Plessy is the law of the land, and the law requires Mr. Murray be given an equal education. At 5 o'clock on June 25th, 1935, we get ordered back into court, and Judge Eugene O'Dunn bangs his gavel and orders the University of Maryland to admit Donald Gaines Murray to its law school. Like Charlie Houston said, the law is a weapon. Now, I know it was just one small crack in the great wall of opportunity that separated Negroes. But that didn't keep me and Charlie from booting up a few. We closed quite a few saloons that night. New York City. Charlie offered me $200 a month to come and join him at the legal department at the NAACP in New York, and I grabbed it. So me and Buster, we got a little apartment in Harlem. Now, our offices in New York weren't anything special. Hell, you had to walk around with winos just to get in the front door. See, but Charlie Houston, he had a plan. He said that real political power wouldn't come until Negroes had a vote that meant something. Well, I said, hell, there are 1 million Negroes in Texas. We get 1 million Negro votes, that means something. We're going to have ourselves some fun. So Charlie sent me down south. And when I got there, I discovered all sorts of schemes designed to do one thing, to keep Negroes from voting. Poll taxes, literacy tests, physical intimidation. Hell, the day before I got to Louisiana, a sheriff shot and killed a Negro just for registering to vote. You see, now, in Texas, Negroes could vote in the general election. But that didn't mean nothing, because Texas was a Democratic state. So whoever won the Democratic primary was automatically elected, and Negroes weren't allowed to vote in the primaries. Well, that got me fired up. So we go into the Texas courts. And do you know what the Democratic Party officials say? They say their party is a private club, and they are free to select their own membership. And the Texas courts agreed with them. Well, 1 year later, the Supreme Court agreed to hear our appeal of the case. It was called Smith v. Albright. I called Buster the morning the decision came down, April 4th, 1944. 8-1 for us, honey. Buster burst into tears. And then do you know what happened? Negroes put on their Sunday best just to register to vote. It must have been 100 degrees outside, and they're standing in a long line. This white couple comes along and starts pushing, trying to get ahead. This Negro woman with a parasol says, you know something, y'all look like you're in a hurry. Why don't you just go on ahead? We've been waiting a mighty long time, and we don't mind waiting a little bit longer. I knew our victory in the voting case was the beginning of real progress. A man isn't a real citizen without a ballot. But I also knew something else. The ballot don't mean much without a first-class education. You know how they used to say the reason white folks didn't want to open up the schoolhouse door was because it would lead straight to the bedroom door? Do I need to remind you that that door has been open for a mighty long time? So next, I had to go to Clarendon County, South Carolina. Cold hard truth of it is that every time I would get on a train down south, I wasn't sure whether or not I was coming back. I'll tell you a story. We were defending 2 Negroes charged with murder during a race riot in Columbia, Tennessee, near the birthplace of the Ku Klux Klan. The word was out that if we tried to sleep in that town, they would kill us. So we would drive 45 miles every night to Nashville. Well, one evening around sunset, we're leaving, and I spot 3 or 4 state police cars. They pull us over. I'm at the wheel. They say they got a warrant to search our car. The sheriff says, all right, boys, check out the trunk. I tell my people, hey, now be careful now. Don't let them plant nothing on us. See, because it's a dry county, and they know that lawyers are going to drink. But believe it or not, we didn't have any alcohol in the car. Sheriff says, all right, search this nigger lawyer here. Hey, you got a warrant? No? Well, then the answer is no. All right, this must be the one. You get out of the car. Wait, for what? For drunken driving. I haven't had a drink in 24 hours. They shoved me in the police car between 2 beefy deputies and take off. Now, soon the car turns off the road and heads down towards the river. We get to a place where there's this big tree and a bunch of people standing all around it with a rope hanging over it. They fix it and do a little lynching. Well, the car with my friend shows up, and these deputies, I guess, they get cold feet. The sheriff carries me on back into town. Now, the streets are empty. Hell, everybody's down by the river. Sheriff says, all right, nigga, magistrate's office is over yonder building. Get. I say, you ain't gonna shoot me for trying to escape, are you? Oh, smart ass nigga, are you? He carries me on over. Now, the little magistrate, he ain't but 5 foot nothing. He comes out. What's up? We got this boy for drunken driving. I'm not drunk.
Yeah? You want to take my test?
Well, what's your test?
I'm a teetotaler. I ain't never had a drink of alcohol in my life. I can smell it from a mile off. You want to take a chance? Blow your breath on me.
I blew my breath on him so hard I rocked him.
What the hell you boys talking about? This man ain't had a drink in 24 hours. Get out of here.
And I got on the fastest goddamn train out of there, and then I had a drink. I sat with a bottle of wild turkey and I thanked the Lord. But I thought about those Negroes that stayed behind. They were the real heroes. I met a preacher down there who said he refused to turn the other cheek. He said he kept two things in the glove compartment of his car, a Bible and a 45. He said, I'll try the Bible first. But anyway, like I said, I had to go to Clarendon County, South Carolina. You see, the school superintendent down there had refused to provide a school bus for the Scotts Branch School. It was a little one-room schoolhouse. We call them doghouse schools. Now, the governor of South Carolina, James F. Burns, he said he would spend millions to make Negro schools equal, but he would never integrate. This took us to a 3-judge court in Charleston, South Carolina, where we would have to prove that segregation did actual harm to our clients. So, we brought in Dr. Kenneth Clark, a social psychologist from New York. Dr. Clark got off the train with these $2. With the court order and these $2, Dr. Clark went to the Scotts Branch School. Tell me, son, what color is this doll? What color is this doll? Which doll looks most like you? Which doll do you want to play with? Which doll do you like the most? Which doll don't you like? Your Honors, each and every one of our tests shows an unmistakable preference for the white doll and a rejection of the brown doll. This overwhelmingly suggests that segregation has a detrimental effect on the personality development of these Negro children. And they, like anyone subjected to inferior status, are irreparably harmed. And consider the moral confusion of the white child. They see the very people who teach them about democracy also teach them how to discriminate. Governor Burns says that he will spend millions to make Negro schools equal. He says all we need is time. The 14th Amendment, ratified in 1868 by all of the states, including South Carolina, recommends those rights, offers those rights, demands those rights in the present, not at some time in the future. If the Negro children of Clarendon County are entitled to any rights, they're entitled to those rights now. Now is the time to end this injustice. Now is the time for this court to act. Well, that 3-judge court, they acted all right. One judge voted for us, the other 2 slammed us, citing Plessy v. Ferguson, saying that segregated schools worked against the Constitution and that South Carolina should be given more time. It's really hit me in the gut. I really thought we were going to win. The local papers crowed like keeping school children segregated was going to save America. So while South Carolina took its time, the Negro children would suffer day after day in those doghouse schools. I gotta tell you, sometimes I get a little weary trying to save the white man's soul. The following year, the Supreme Court announced that they would hear a repeal of the South Carolina case, along with school cases we had in Kansas, Delaware, Virginia, and the District of Columbia. All of these cases were bundled together and called Brown v. the Board of Education. We spent the next 6 months preparing. And we had the best damn team of lawyers you could ask for, many of them trained right here at Howard by Charlie Houston. But many Negroes didn't think we were right challenging segregation head on at the Supreme Court. They say if we lose, we're right back in the ditch for the next 20 years. We had a big debate about it right here at Howard, where everybody had their say. But I knew it was time to roll the dice. Brothers and sisters, it's 1952. 300 years since we were first brought here on slave ships. Almost 100 years since the Emancipation Proclamation. Do you want to wait forever? Do you know who Governor Burns enlisted to represent South Carolina? None other than John W. Davis, the lawyer's lawyer. I climbed the steps to the Supreme Court building on a cold, rainy December morning. I saw a line of people on the stairs all the way up towards the Capitol Dome, many of them black and poor and counting on us. I stared at those words carved in stone. Equal justice under law. I hope so. May it please the court, I speak on behalf of the Negro children of Clarendon County, South Carolina, who raised their attack on the validity of the South Carolina Code that states it shall be unlawful for pupils of one race to attend schools provided for persons of another race. In the lower courts, we produced unchallenged experts that testified that segregation destroys the self-respect of Negro children and stamps them with the badge of inferiority. This court must weigh the rights of those Negro children against that state policy, and if that state policy violates their rights, then this court is obliged to say, reluctantly or otherwise, that it has run up against the 14th Amendment, which guarantees equal treatment to all of its citizens. Well, yes, Justice Reed, the states would have responsibility to maintain law and order. Well, no, Justice Frankfurter, it would not be gerrymandering of school districts. Instead, no, sir. I think it's important to establish the principle that segregation by race is not legal. Well, sir, I cannot say at this time precisely how it would work. Justice Frankfurter shot back at me. It is important, Mr. Marshall, before one starts out, that one knows where one is going. You have less than 1 hour to make your case, and the justices can interrupt you anytime they please. They really peppered me. They interrupted me 43 times. I had this one opportunity to convince them that segregation was morally wrong, and I got unhinged by their questions. John W. Davis had argued 138 cases before the Supreme Court, more than any other lawyer in history except for Daniel Webster. He spoke softly, as if to old friends. May it please the court, the resolution proposed in the 14th Amendment was first proffered to Congress in 1866. 1 month later, the same Congress proceeded to establish separate schools for the races right here in the District of Columbia. And from that good day till this, Congress has not wavered in that policy. So clearly, Congress does not believe the Constitution speaks against segregated schools. In Plessy v. Ferguson and in 6 subsequent decisions by this court, nothing can be found that modifies the doctrine of separate but equal. So I might ask, why is this a matter of great national policy? Is not the very fiber and strength of our federal system local self-government? And of all of the activities of government, is not the one that comes nearest and dearest to the hearts and minds of the people, the education of their young? I humbly submit, there is no reason for this court to reverse the findings of 90 years. When Davis left the court, he told Governor Burns, I think we've got it won 6-3, maybe 5-4. In the words of General Stonewall Jackson, we have them, and they will never see home. That night I walked the streets in the rain. No hat, no coat, no pride. Remembering the days I used to come over from Howard and stand in the back of the chain. I thought about all those people standing in the rain that morning and the Negro children in those doghouse schools. They were all counting on me, the most important goddamn case of the century. And what do? I get tangled up in their questions. It reminded me of something Charlie Houston used to tell us. The difference between doctors and lawyers is that doctors can bury their mistakes. I made it back to the hotel room, chin on the floor. Buster took one look at me and said, "Thurgood, pull your socks up." More than anything, we had wanted to start a family. This was the night she told me she was pregnant. And of course, the first thing I said was, "We'll call him Thurgood." She said, "Well, what if it's a girl?" I said, "Well, if it's a girl, we'll still call him Thurgood." So, while Chief Justice Vinson and the other justices weighed our case, outside pressure began to mount. Some governors came right out and said they would resist any order to integrate their schools. So we began to ask, well, what happens if the Supreme Court offers an opinion and the states refuse to obey? Oh, the Supreme Court doesn't have an army. You know how we Negroes say we have a sixth sense that tells us whether or not a white person is for us or against us? My sixth sense told me that Chief Justice Vinson was not my friend. I was 6,000 miles away from home in Korea when Buster told me we lost the baby. It was our third miscarriage. We tried everything. On the long flight home, I added it all up. I'd been away from home more than 200 nights that year. Away from your wife that much. Not the best way to be a good husband. And then, a bombshell. Both sides are ordered back to court to re-argue the case, focusing on this question. What evidence is there that the framers of the 14th Amendment contemplated it would outlaw segregation in schools? I had had clients on death row that had received a stay of execution from the governor. Now I knew how they felt. Soon our offices were filled with teams of scholars and lawyers researching the history of the states that had ratified the 14th Amendment. And we were running out of money. I spent half my time on the phone begging for help. And then at home, I noticed something. I said, "Buster, where are your pearl earrings?" "I sold them." "Wait, you sold them?" "Yes, I sent the money to the NAACP. "I don't want you selling your jewelry." "Thurgood, if your mother hadn't sold her rings, where would you be at today?" Buster had her own way of sending me to the furnace room. We were doing late night strategy sessions, and we had this new young lawyer come on board from Texas named Black, this white guy named Charlie Black. Now, some of our guys were a little worried about having him in our strategy sessions because of his deep Texas roots. So one day, Bob Carter says in front of everybody, "So, Mr. Black, I've been meaning to ask you, with all of the opportunities before you, how did you end up working here at the NAACP for $200 a month?" Well, now, I'll tell you, I come from deep, deep in Texas. So deep, I can't even remember hearing the word Republican until I was 18 years old. But I had heard of this really terrible organization up north called the NAACP. Woo! It was an awful place with a big old office right there in the middle of New York City. Worst thing of all was they say inside that office there was this secret room with no windows and no doors and walls about a foot thick. And do you know what they say was inside that room? Why, they say all over the wall there were hooks, hundreds and hundreds of hooks. And on each and every one of those hooks was the key to the bedroom door of a Southern white woman. Well, I figure, hell, that's the kind of organization I want to be involved with. And then another bombshell. I get a call at midnight. Chief Justice Vinson died of a heart attack. So we started asking who might President Eisenhower appoint as a new Chief Justice. 4 days before the new term started, we found out. It seems that Ike had made an agreement at the Republican convention that the next Supreme Court vacancy would go to California Governor Earl Warren. Warren was the man who, during World War II, sent 80,000 Japanese American citizens living in California to internment camps. Would he be your choice? I told Buster I was going to make the most out of this second chance. John W. Davis let everybody know that this was his swan song, his final argument before the court. You could see great esteem for him in the faces of all 9 justices. May it please the court. The old horn don't honk as loud as it used to, but I hope y'all can hear me. In Clarendon County School District number 1, the state of South Carolina has provided truly equal schools for the Negro students in every respect. In fact, because of their being newer, they may be better than the schools provided for the white children. Who would want to disturb this situation? In Clarendon County, there are 2,790 registered Negro children of school age. There are 290 whites. If you took all of the Negro children and commingled them with all of the white children, you would have in each classroom 27 Negroes and 3 whites. Would this make the children any happier? Would they learn more quickly? We think it 1,000 pities that South Carolina might be ordered to abandon that which it has created. South Carolina has equal education, not prophesied, but present. And so I suggest it should not be thrown away over some fancy question of racial prestige. I understand it is not my place to offer advice to the learned counsel on the other side. They no doubt believe what they propose to be the best. But I urge them to remember the age-old motto: the best is often the enemy of the good. When the old man finished, he had tears in his eyes. So did 1 or 2 of the justices. May it please the court, as I understand the position of the distinguished defense counsel, his justification for segregation in South Carolina is that 1, they all just got together and decided amongst themselves that it was best to keep the races separate, and 2, that segregation has existed for over a century. Neither argument, to my mind, is any good. The Negroes who are forced to submit to segregation are all American citizens, who by accident of birth are a different color. Color makes no difference insofar as this court is concerned. The 14th Amendment was put into our Constitution after a bloody Civil War. The duty of enforcing it falls upon this court to make sure that states ignore their little pet feelings about race. The only way this court can decide this case in opposition to our position is to find that for some reason Negroes are inferior to all other human beings. No one will stand up in this court and say that. They would have to justify it. Only one thing can justify continued segregation: a determination that the people who were once enslaved shall be kept as near that condition as possible. Now is the time, I submit, for this court to make clear that that is not what the Constitution of the United States of America stands for. The case was in their hands now. We had months to wait, and waiting always makes me itchy. I was worried about Chief Justice Warren. He was a politician. His judicial philosophy was unknown. I found out later that during the court's deliberations, he made a trip to the Civil War battlefields. His chauffeur, a Negro who had fought in World War II, took him to Gettysburg, where Warren contemplated the gravestones and studied the monument with Lincoln's simple words on it. When he left, on the way home, he decided to stop in Virginia for the night. He got up the next morning and found his car parked under a tree with his chauffeur asleep in the back. He woke him up and asked him, so, well, why are you sleeping in the car? His chauffeur said, well, Mr. Chief Justice, there wasn't a place within 20 miles of here where I could find a room. Then, late one night in May, I get a tip, and I am on the first train to Washington, D.C. I sprint up those steps to the Supreme Court building. Equal justice under law. We'll see.
I have for announcement the opinion of the court in Brown v. the Board of Education. In approaching this question, we cannot turn the clock back to 1868 when the 14th Amendment was adopted, or even to 1896 when Plessy v. Ferguson was written. We must consider public education in the light of its present place in American life. We come to the question: does segregation of children in public schools solely on the basis of race, even though the physical facilities may be equal, deprive the children of the minority group of equal educational opportunities? We believe, unanimously, that it does. We conclude that in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. Separate educational facilities are inherently unequal. Therefore, we hold that the plaintiffs are deprived of the equal protection of the laws guaranteed by the 14th Amendment. It is so ordered.
17 May, 1954. The highest court in the nation said that America could no longer humiliate its colored citizens by keeping them separate. Chief Justice Warren led the court to a unanimous decision, believing that the court's unity would send a signal to the nation. I told the New York Times the next day that I believe segregated schools would be over in America within 5 years. Finished, done with. And then the governor of Virginia announced that he would use all legal means to continue segregated schools. And Senator Strom Thurmond led 97 congressmen to sign a Southern Manifesto vowing to defy the Supreme Court. I felt it was President Eisenhower's duty to stand up and tell the nation that Brown was the law of the land and to use his executive power to enforce the decision. But do you know what Ike said when somebody asked him what he thought? He said he didn't have an opinion one way or the other. If Ike had fought World War II the way he fought for civil rights, we'd all be speaking German today. So it meant that our country would have to go through a long and painful process. There were protests, marches, and boycotts. We worked around the clock getting protesters out of jail. Martin King Jr., he was a great leader, but he would dump all of his legal problems on us, including the bills. I had fights with Martin all the time about his theory of disobeying the law. See, I didn't believe in that. My approach was to use the law, not break it. I tell Martin all the time, look, you got two rights. You got the right to break the jail, and you got the right to go to jail for it. He'd come talking to me about Henry David Thoreau's theory of civil disobedience, and I would remind him that Thoreau wrote civil disobedience in jail. I knew during the school cases that Buster hadn't been doing well, but she always insisted she was well enough to go to Washington to be in court with me. That was until the decision. She didn't make that trip. It was then, when she could no longer hide it, I found out just how sick she was. She said she hadn't wanted to add to my burden. What kind of man has a wife dying of cancer and doesn't even know it? She was gone in 6 months. She died on February 11th, her 44th birthday. With Buster gone, I lost 30 pounds, kept a bottle in my desk drawer for company. I was rude, irritable. Nobody wanted to be around me. Eventually, I poured myself back into my work. Resistance to the Supreme Court decision meant we all had to pull up our socks and go into courtrooms all over the South. But you see, the school decision, it gave us a precedent. Now, equal meant integrated. Now we could challenge segregation of libraries, restaurants, and public toilets. Growing up in Baltimore, there weren't a lot of public toilets for colored folks. So if you felt something coming on, your best hope was to hop on the trolley for home and hope for the best. One day I got off the trolley and I made it as far as my front door. That's more than a little inconvenience. You don't forget something like that. It came too late for my mother and my daddy, but those old white-only signs, well, they were finally starting to come down in Baltimore. So it had been 5 years since the Brown decision, and I decided that it was finally time to stop traveling 100,000 miles a year and join a big law firm and do something I'd never managed to do before. Make myself a bunch of money. I started seeing Cecilia Suyat, who worked in our office. Sissy had a sense of humor that kept me in line. In time, we got married, and she made me a very happy man. Along came Thurgood Jr. He was a boy. And John. And one day I get a call from the new United States Attorney General, Robert Kennedy, telling me that President Kennedy wants to make me a judge on the Federal Court of Appeals, the second highest court in the land. The chief judge of the court in New York, he made my swearing in a nice deal. He arranged for a group photograph with all of the other judges. Well, before anybody arrived, the photographer took a test shot and blew a fuse. So when I showed up, everybody was milling around in the dark. And this flustered secretary sees me and says, "Oh, thank goodness, the electrician." Lady, you must be crazy if you think a colored man can become an electrician in New York City. At first, I was low man on the court, handling the least interesting cases like tax law and corporate law. And I got all the Wall Street security cases because all the other judges owned stocks and had conflicts of interest. I used to tell them all the time, it must be nice for you boys to have a poor man on the court to handle all of this work for you. But let the record show, I wrote 98 majority opinions, and not one was reversed by the Supreme Court. So one day I'm in the judge's dining hall having lunch, and the bailiff comes running in. "Hey, Judge, Fred, I told you not to bother me while I'm eating." "Well, Judge, the president wants to talk to you." "The president of what?" "The president of the United States, Lyndon Johnson." "Judge Marshall, I want to make you the Solicitor General of the United States of America." "Why, thank you, Mr. President. Could I have some time to talk to Mrs. Marshall about this?" Sure. You take all the time you need." Next day, I get to the office. The phone rings. It's LBJ. "Mr. President, you said I'd have all the time I needed." "Well, you've had time." "Okay, Mr. President, well, number one, it would be a $5,000 pay cut." "I know that." Number two, Mr. President, I'd be giving up a lifetime job on the court." "I know that." "Well, finally, Mr. President, I don't have any money." "I know that too. I got your tax return right in front of me." And then, right there over the phone, Lyndon B. Johnson took me by the ears. "Thurgood, I want people to go into the Supreme Court and see a black man in the Solicitor General's cutout coat and ask the question, who is that Negro? And hear the answer,
He is the Solicitor General of the United States of America. By the time LBJ had finished with me, I was ashamed I hadn't volunteered. So, me, Sissy, and the boys, we moved to Washington, D.C. This Pullman car waiter's son was about to become the highest ranking Negro to ever serve in the United States government. Now, there was a rumor that if a vacancy opened up on the Supreme Court, that LBJ might appoint me. But the politicians were telling him if he put a Negro on the court, it would cost him the South in the '68 election. On the night that Justice Tom Clark retired, I went to a party in his honor, and LBJ pulled me aside. "Don't expect the job." Well, that really hurt me, see, because I really wanted that job. I thought I'd earned it. But I figured some no-good sons of bitches had stoked LBJ up with rumors about me and booze and women. The next day, he calls me over to the White House. I'm figuring he's going to explain why he's not appointing me. He says, "You know something, Thurgood? I'm going to put you on the Supreme Court." Why, thank you, Mr. President. "Have you told Sissy?" Well, how could I tell Sissy? I didn't know anything. She'll be shocked. "Well, goddamn, let's get her on the phone and break the news." Before you know it, the White House operator has Sissy on speakerphone. I say, "Hi, honey." She says, "Hey, Thurgood, did we get the Supreme Court appointment?" Never heard a man laugh the way LBJ did. He called me after I was confirmed and he said, "Congratulations, Justice Marshall, but God damn it, the hell you done put me through. I ain't never been through such hell before." Mr. President, this was your idea, not mine. I would be sworn in the Rose Garden of the White House by my good friend, Supreme Court Justice Hugo Black, a former member of the Ku Klux Klan. I would wear this robe for nearly 25 years, write opinions for 322 cases. I did everything within my power to protect the civil rights of each and every American citizen. Now, I say that the death penalty is cruel and unusual punishment. They say it's a deterrent. I say, well, hell, if it was really a deterrent, there never would have been a second execution after the first one. I'm for gun control, complete gun control. I can see no reason why a private citizen should have to carry a pistol or a machine gun. I wrote opinions on the First Amendment. I believe that whatever reason states might have to regulate obscenity, they do not reach into the privacy of a person's own home. We had to view some pornographic films for one of these cases one time. That was a fun assignment. At the end of one of the films, I looked over at the Chief Justice and I said, "Did you learn anything new watching that one?" I didn't. So one day was my last day on the court, but nobody knew that. I walked around the bench and stood right where I did when I argued the school case, and I addressed my fellow justices. May it please the court, I stand here with my son, Thurgood Marshall Jr., and my daughter-in-law, Colleen Mahoney. Honorable justices, I vouch for their standings as lawyers and recommend their admission to the bar of the Supreme Court of the United States of America. Sitting in the third row next to Sissy was my other son, John, a United States Marshal, a man of the law. Would I be bragging if I told you this was the proudest day of my life? So, I'd given 50 years to the law, and Sissy and I had made a decision. This was it. Now, I know how far we've come, and I know how far we've got to go. And I may have retired next to my name, but I'm going to stay in this fight until the following thing happens. That on one day in the future, on a commuter train going to New York, coming through Connecticut, taking wealthy people down to Wall Street. On this day in the future, a Negro gets on the train up around Fairfield. He's wearing his Brooks Brothers suit, derby hat, dispatch case banged up just enough, Wall Street Journal under one arm. The train continues along its route, making its stops, and eventually it gets crowded. Near the last stop, a white woman gets on the train. She walks up and down the train looking for an empty seat, and there's just one. It's next to this Negro. She sits down. Finally, she can't take it anymore. She screams out, "Niggers, niggers, niggers!" And the Negro jumps up, "Where? I think my old schoolmate Langston Hughes said it pretty well. Oh, let America be America again. The land that never has been yet, and yet must be. The land where every man is free. The land that's mine. The poor man's, Indians, Negroes, me. Whose sweat and blood, whose faith and pain must bring back our mighty dream again. Yes, I say it plain. America never was America to me. And yet, I swear this oath, America will be. Just a couple of words here. We all stand on the shoulders of giants. Doesn't matter what your political affiliation is, your gender, sexual orientation, race, we all stand on the shoulders of giants. I've been working on this project since last September. Whew. I would be remiss if I didn't thank the three most people involved in this project with me. My director, Aaron, who Aaron is on his way to Israel for 5 months. He's going to be working. My hope is that he'll come back to the States and go to graduate school and get his master's degree as a director. That's just me. I want to thank Juliet Davis. When I first met Juliet, she was working over the summer in New York City, dishing out, let me get this right, organic soy ice cream to New York yuppies. So I figured I could be a better employer than they were. I hope I have been. Next is my production manager, Summer Mead. Let's all take 5 seconds of silence. Summer is a double major, theater and neuroscience. And this week her worms got a fungus and they died. Unlike the Queen's funeral, which took 2 weeks, I think hers took about 5 seconds. She dumped them out, got some new worms. Thank you, Summer. The three of you, if you don't know it, all three, you're so precious to me. Thank you so much for your help. I would not have wanted to do this without your help. So thank you. And thank you all for coming. Thank you.